Sahab and Professor P.K. Srivastava Sahab from IIT Patna regarding this COVID-19. And just as the title you already know is mathematical modeling and the pandemic. So looking forward to hear something from you on mathematical modeling. So I feel all the candidates are here in with us, and maybe we can start with your lecture, Professor Rana.
Can I share? Can I share my screen? Is that
sure, sir, sure.
All right. Okay, so let me. All right. So, firstly, thanks so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to talk in this session. And I was told that this is a technical session on mathematical modeling of the pandemic, the recent global pandemic. Now, quick disclaimer: my own personal work is not sort of so much focused on epidemics and epidemic modeling. I'm more of population, sort of ecology, invasive species, predator prey sort of guy. But I will certainly discuss some recent mathematical modeling stuff which is applicable to pandemic modeling, and I will briefly foray into these susceptible infected models, not quite SIR, but more SI, just to keep with the flavor of the session. And feel free to stop me at any time if there's questions. I was told it's an hour lecture, so I'll try to get done inside 1 hour, and maybe leave a few minutes for questions at the end. But feel free to ask me any questions at any time. And I'm going to use my mouse. I might point to things. So my cursor, I hope you can see it when I point to sort of various things, because that will be important. And the date is it's a LaTeX issue because it's still the 12th here in the US. It's the night of the 12th. So I'm 11 and a half hours behind. So that's the thing with the date. It doesn't autocorrect. But we can get started. So I thought I'd talk about some recent work on invasive species, and in particular, the so-called indirect effects of invasive species. So I'll motivate, the invasive species problem, and then talk about two separate problems as far as these indirect effects go. So one is the problem with invasive epibiont species, and I'll tell you what those things are. And then I'll focus on sort of the control side of things, and that's the so-called additional food problem. And then I at this point, I'll foray a little bit into epidemics and these susceptible infected models briefly, just to keep with the flavor, of the session. And then we can conclude. This is all collaborative work. Just to mention a few collaborators. Linda Ocker is a biologist. She's a marine biologist at Misericordia University in Pennsylvania. Susan Bailey is a biologist and evolutionary biologist at Clarkson University, New York. Jingjing Liu is a former PhD student of mine. She graduated some years back, 2 years back, and she worked on this epibiont problem. Sureni Vikram Surya is a current PhD student. She is set to graduate next semester, and she has worked on the additional food problem. So it's a joint effort with all of these folks. Okay, so invasive species are non-native plants or animals introduced into an environment typically by some external means. So they present a significant problem to ecosystems and to economies worldwide. Pimental's, classic 2005 work sort of illustrates, to what effect these things.
Sorry to disturb you, sir.
Yes.
We are unable to see your presentation at present.
You cannot see it?
No.
Okay. There should be a way.
Present now on the right hand corner, downward.
Entire screen allow. Okay.
Yeah, now it comes.
So can you see my screen?
Yeah. Now it's available. Now it's seen.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Okay, great. So I won't sort of repeat everything. Most of it is just sort of introductory, but we can, start off at this slide with invasive species. These are non-native plants or animals introduced by some external means, and they present a significant problem to ecosystems and economies. Most people cite this Pimental paper, and they often have traits that allow them to outcompete native species. So the invasion process is essentially a three-step process, right? So some species is introduced by whatever means, right? It could come in on a ship, for example, or it could come in as part of the pet trade, or into a zoo in a country of interest. And the next stage is this population that comes in is able to colonize locally, all right, and establish its population. And then this sort of spreads outwards. So this is the three-step, essential steps in the invasion process. And as I mentioned, the coming in could be anything, the pet trade, or whatever means. And then there's a local growth and spread, and then there's an establishment. So my work is mostly interested, or I am mostly interested in this establishment phase, or after this harmful population has gotten established, as in how do you control it? Right? Well, what might you do to control this population? And there's lots and lots of ways that you might choose to control the population. So we look at some of those. Now, most people will do, pesticide, chemicals. That's what most people will know of. If you just ask someone, how do you kill a pest or an invasive species, they say, it's chemicals. So we all know of the detriments to the environment from that, all right? The bigger issue really with chemicals is the business of resistance evolution. Right? So no matter how much of chemical you put, you're not going to kill the entire, harmful population. Some of them will survive, right? Typically in practice, you can't kill the entire population. Now, those that survive become resistant to this chemical, all right? And so that will reproduce. And so the more chemical that you are using, you will kill everyone who's not resistant except the one who's resistant. And when that reproduces, whatever it produces, everyone, in its family is essentially resistant. So that's why chemicals are not the best. So there's alternative means of doing this, or biocontrol, right, which is what I'm really interested in. So biocontrol is where you use a secondary biological population, like a predator, to control the pest or invasive species of interest. All right, this is predator-based biocontrol. Now, there's also the business of genetic biocontrol, where you can manipulate the mating systems of these invasive populations. I won't talk about this in today's talk, although I've worked on this a fair bit. My work today will be focused on classical biocontrol and things sort of stemming from that. Okay, so this is a very recent Nature paper that shows sort of the growth of invasive species, and they're looking at number of new invasions over time, and they've sort of averaged somehow in space, and you see these numbers sort of going up, and it's only going up, and the panels below are different species, whether it's reptiles or birds or fish, but overall it's a serious problem, and it's a Nature paper, very recent, so something more recent to cite than Pimental, which is now about 15 years old. So in the US, just to give you some visual examples, in the US a big problem is the Burmese python, which came in from Burma in Indochina. It's a big problem in South Florida, and you can look at the first panel where it has actually attacked the classical top predator in the system, the American alligator. And in the second panel, you can actually see that it's completely swallowed the American alligator. So it's causing sort of huge problems there. There's a recent PNAS paper that says they are responsible for cleaning out about 70% of all prey items in the Florida glades. And this is the main way they cause problems, or they might. Directly. They will directly compete with other species, right? The American alligator has no competition, classically, right? It's the top predator. But now with the Burmese python, there is this competition. Or predation, it will eat up everything. So these are so-called direct effects. What I want to talk about today is not direct effects, is something called indirect effects. So they can also indirectly affect ecosystems, all right? So to give you a flavor of what an indirect effect is, there's lots of different kinds of indirect effects. The most classical one is apparent competition. So look at panel A, where I'm moving my mouse. Let's focus on that picture. The others are not important, right? For understanding this situation, at least. So you can think of an ecosystem where there are two prey items, R1 and R2, okay? Now these two typically are not in any competition, let's say. And they will both grow to carrying capacity. However, if a predator C enters the system, then these two might be in what is called apparent competition. Why? Because the predator C might attack R1 and then get resources from R1. And if R1's population is depleted, the predator will then attack R2. So R1 and R2 now seem to be in this, density-dependent competition scenario because of the predator C. The predator C was not there. There's no competition. R1 goes to carrying capacity, R2 goes to carrying capacity. So just as, easy example of how something might indirectly affect an ecosystem. Now, this is theoretical, of course. Let's look at the application that I am interested in. So, and this is work with Ocker and then former student Jingjing Liu. So the motivation here was the declining population of mussels All right. So mussels are this, shellfish food group, which is common in lots and lots of parts of the world. It is a keystone species, helps filter nutrients in water. It's a prey item for many predators. Human beings, in coastal areas like to eat this as a food group. It's used to make ornaments and various things. But its population in the Gulf of Maine, which is Gulf on the eastern part of the U.S., right down from Rhode Island going up all the way to Canada, is declining. All right, so this mussel population seems to be going down, and people ask why that might be happening. So there's lots of answers posed, and what might be possible reasons. So I'm going to pose a possible answer. Because of a certain invasive species, which is acting indirectly. All right, indirectly. So now, this is a clean mussel line. Mussels are farmed, right? There's a string, a lot of mussels, they go right down to the water, and they grow, and then farmers will pull the lines up, clean them off, and then take them to the market or wherever they need to. So that is how a clean mussel line looks. Okay. Now in the 70s, an invasive species, Divexillum, entered the Gulf of Maine, an Ascidian species. Now, instead of going through biology and biological definitions of what these Ascidians are, I'm just going to show you a video. Okay. So you saw what a clean mussel line looks like. This is also a mussel line. See, those are mussels, the little brown things. These are mussels. You can see the mussels. But most of it is covered by this yellow, mushy sort of species, which is completely covering up the mussel line, and then breaks off and falls to the floor. And so that, you get the idea. So that video was taken by my collaborator, Linda Ocker. She's actually diving down and sort of, counting and measuring these things. And so this yellow invasive species is Divexillum. All right. So what it came in initially from Japan through, ships, and it basically grows on any hard surface you can find, any solid hard surface, including mussel lines. Okay, just overgrows them. So completely covers these mussel lines in that video, as you saw. Now that can cause some issues. What are the issues? Let's see this. Full screen this again. Now, in order to understand how and in what capacity it is affecting the mussel population, let us understand what happens without this invasive species. So typically there's mussels, and who eats mussels? Crabs eat mussels. All right, that's the classic predator-prey system going on here. And what a predator wants to do typically is to maximize a ratio called E/H. Okay, it wants to maximize energy gain over the time it takes to hunt, right? So it wants to maximize energy and somehow minimize the hunting time. That will maximize E/H, all right? So that's what the crab is trying to do. You can just focus on the box. You don't need to follow everything else. Optimal foraging theory, which all predators follow, says that the predator is trying to maximize, in some sense, E over hunting time. Energy gained from the prey and minimize the time it takes to search for the prey, and the time it takes to handle the prey. This is what the crab is trying to do. Now, how does the crab do this, right? The crabs can't do calculus, right? So they can't find maximum minimum. So what is this? What is this crab doing? There's some natural process at work, right? So very simply put, if a crab is given a choice of two mussels, mussel 1 and mussel 2, where there's some energy gain from mussel 1 over handling time and search time, and energy gain from mussel 2 and handling time of mussel 2. Whichever is bigger, the crab will attack that one. This is classical theory. And so lots of experiments will show that crab preference essentially looks like this if I am plotting preference versus muscle size, or crab preference as a function of muscle size, okay? So medium-sized mussel is really preferred by the crab. It doesn't prefer very big mussels because it can't break them easily. So it will take very long to hunt it, okay? Right, the TS over TH will be large. It doesn't prefer very small mussels because it might be easy to break it, but then energy gain is less, right? So E over H is not maximum. Somehow a medium-sized mussel is preferred, okay? So this is what the crab prefers. And this is what is happening in the Gulf of Maine. But now this invasive species comes in. Now what happens in this setting? So what happens in this setting is the following. So let's try to understand this picture. The crab prefers a medium-sized mussel, right? It does not prefer the small baby mussels, as I just explained. But now this invasive species, that's the yellow stuff right here, comes in, and it starts to cover up these mussels. But this guy can't cover the baby mussels. That's some of the mussels you saw, in that video, which were visible. Because these baby mussels have a very slippery exterior in their first month, right? This peristrosium. So this guy can't grow on the small mussel, but it easily grows on the big mussel. So now you see the crab is faced with a dilemma. If this guy wasn't there, if the invasive species wasn't there, of course, the crab is attacking here. But now the invasive species comes in and covers this guy. So what will the crab do? This guy is covered. It's difficult to tear open this invasive species and attack its favorite food. So would the crab move to the juvenile, although it isn't preferred? It might. Now, if it does that, what does modeling tell us? Could that somehow affect the overall mussel population? And if you start taking away juveniles from a population, that certainly affects population, right? The recruitment to adult class will be lessened, and then there's problems. So this is the setup, and this is the takeaway idea. I'll go through a few equations, but this is not so important. You might not catch every detail here. It doesn't matter. So you can sort of model this with a system of ODEs, 4 state variables, C for the crab population, MA for the adult, MJ for juvenile, and E for the epibiont. The epibiont equation is very simple, at least in this work. It is just a logistic equation, and epibionts will come and grow to carrying capacity, whatever that carrying capacity is. Now, the crab has a death rate and then an attack rate, and it feeds on adult and juvenile mussels. And the adult juvenile system is basically given by the adults are growing as a function of the juvenile. There's some competition, and then there's predation, by the crabs. And at some rate, juveniles, become adults. Now, the thing to understand here, the modeling here is these attack rates, U1, U2, these depend on the epibiont density, right? If E is 0, if there's no epibiont, if there's no invasive species, one simple modeling is, U1 is K minus E over K, U2 is E over K. So if E is 0, then U1 is 1 and U2 is 0. U1 is the attack rate on the adult. So only the adult is attacked, which optimal foraging theory predicts, of course. But as the epibiont comes and grows to carrying capacity, E becomes K. And so U2 becomes 1 because the adult is completely covered. It can't attack the adult. So it's going to completely attack the juvenile. So you have a density-dependent attack rate here, and you can model this and, prove various things and do various simulations. And some, standard results show that, there is interior steady state and it is stable under certain conditions on the parameters. What is interesting here is when could this really have an effect on the mussel density, on the mussel population? So if we believe that this epibiont is causing this indirect effect and indirectly affecting the mussel population, then I must have the juvenile population when there's no epibiont to be larger than the juvenile population when the epibiont is at total carrying capacity. That would mean when the epibiont has come in and reached its carrying capacity, right? The juvenile population is quite small because the juveniles are really attacked. And you can do some analysis, and this will happen under certain restrictions on the handling times and energy gains. And if this does hold, then certainly, this condition will hold, and there will be less recruitment into adults. And then there will be a declining mussel population. All right, so it's a sort of neat way of showing using mathematical modeling to validate or at least put forward this conjecture that the mussel population is being indirectly affected by this invasive species. Okay, a future goal here is to do some experiments where we present crabs with two classes of mussels, right? One covered and one uncovered, and then look at sort of what's going on. So if you think of this as very small and this as a little bigger, if there was no, invasive species, the attack would always be typically here, and things would look like this, as I showed. But then you can cover this up. You can artificially either use real, epibiont or clay or various things, and then see what happens, right? And so the conjecture is that under these circumstances, the crab will actually change its attack to the smaller guy. And the crab preference, this is classical, all right? All the textbooks will show this, is that maybe you have something going on like this now, under this invasion, this sort of invasion, all right? Very small mussel size is actually highly preferred now. Okay, so this is our conjecture, and we are hoping to conduct experiments to see this. We put out a couple of proposals, and let's see what happens. There is support, a little bit of support from mathematical modeling already, but right, math biology is no good if what you do in modeling is not seen in the lab, typically, at least with some of these agencies. Okay, so that is the first part of my talk, and the next part is going to focus now on some control issues. All right, in these biocontrol issues, really. So I already talked about biocontrol and that trying to control an invasive species can also be done by introducing a predator to predate on this invasive species. Right? This is the whole idea of biocontrol. There's lots of excellent texts. Van Driesch, Anne Hajek's book is more recent, but Van Driesch is the classic. And so we could probably back up a little bit into how one might assist a predator, right? So if I have this ecosystem where I have an invasive species and I send a predator after it, then my goal as a manager is to assist the predator to do its job, to keep the invasive species in low density, maybe drive it extinct if possible, or the pest. So what additional resources can I give it so that it is able to do its job? So there's this theory of additional food, all right, which is very well studied in biology, and recently, last 8-10 years, is studied in math as well, which says that if you provide the predator with an additional food source, something extra, a little bit to boost its energy, that might help it to keep the target invasive species or pest in check. And so in order to do that, I will very briefly foray into predator-prey system, because that is what is going on. And lots of you might be familiar with this stuff, and so I'll just show a few pictures. Most ecosystems are essentially consist of all the predator-prey interactions people will define. Sometimes ecology textbooks will define ecosystem as sum total of predator-prey interactions. So predator is just a hunting organism, like say wolves or bears, which are after some food source. It could be deer, fish, and the predator is always chasing after the prey, killing it based on optimal foraging, and then getting some energy out of that and reproducing, making more predators. If the predator is not there in the ecosystem, typically the prey will grow to some carrying capacity, right? And so there's lots and lots of models, but the basic model, which lots of people would have seen if they took up say basic ODE class, is the Lokta-Volterra, where you might think of X as prey. Here it's a linear growth, not logistic, but predated by a predator Y at some rate, and the predator reproduces. So epsilon typically is small. You need to eat a lot of prey to make one predator, and then it dies out at some rate. And there's lots of motivations for what rate the predator will eat at. Typically these hauling type responses, type 2 or others. So the additional food problem is based essentially on this model, right? Because you have an invasive species or a pest, say Y, you're sending a predator after it to control it. That's the goal. Now, in the additional food model, you're going to try and assist the predator, and that's where some terms will change. And so the question is, can that model predict some kind of control on the prey? Because these models typically cannot, right? So classical Lokta-Volterra does not permit, right, prey extinction. Right? If there was no prey, if there was no X, right, then the predator would decay exponentially. So something extra has to be done. Right? And that's what I was trying to motivate. These predator-prey models will, typically predict cycle, or they can predict steady state, of course, as well. Both species go to steady state, but there's this zero Y star, this prey-free state or pest-free state is not there for the classical model, right? And these predator-prey models are pretty good. There's tons of books written on how you can catch, real data from various sources. And I'll actually show at the end some of our own data where you see these cycles. But as a manager, this is the state you're interested in. I want the invasive species or the pest to be 0, and I want my predator to reach some steady level. And then I can stop the introduction or do whatever. But this is the state of interest. So how do I engineer this state? This is the question. So there's a lot of work done by an Indian group, Srinivasu, and his collaborators. Very interesting work, which modify classical predator-prey model by assuming that the predator is given a certain amount of additional food. And what they show is that with that sort of modeling, you can actually get the 0 Y star state. So I can talk very briefly about Srinivasu class of models. It's the predator-prey model you saw with a few changes, right? So X and Y are what you know. X is the pest species, say, or the invasive species, and Y is a predator that is sent after it. But there is this alpha psi term. Okay, and psi is what they are calling additional food or quantity of additional food. So the predator Y is also given a little bit of additional food apart from the prey that it is chasing. Okay, so the easiest way to see this is if you make psi 0, you'll recover classical predator-prey. It'll be logistically controlled. In my example, classic Lokta-Volterra, it was linear growth, but essentially that's what you see. But bringing psi in, bringing this additional food in, completely changes the dynamics of what is going on. Okay, so there are lots of results with this, but we can focus on the last point. All right, that's the key. So Srinivasu class of models, they predict the 0 Y star state, and this can, under certain conditions, be globally stable. So you can actually always reach 0 Y star under certain parametric restrictions. Okay. And if psi is 0, you can't do that. So the Srinivasu works are very, very interesting to this end, and it's the first works to show of how to manipulate these predator-prey model, classic predator-prey, to get the 0 Y star state. Okay, so this is their classic result, series of papers starting in 7 all the way through 10, 11, that if the quality of additional food satisfies, this inequality, the quality is 1 over alpha, essentially. So right, that is large enough. Then the pest can be eradicated from the ecosystem in a finite time, as long as you give enough additional food. As long as psi is greater than this, then you will have pest extinction, and that will happen in a finite time. So this is their key result. And in the scope of additional food motivated biocontrol, Srinivasu's TPB paper, I think, is the highest cited in the literature. It's over 100, 150 citations, I think, and even the 2011 paper is very highly cited, as indeed it should, because it's sort of the first idea to do this. But there's some issues with this, in that the extinction does not happen in finite time, right? So there's 2 issues that I have particularly with this class of models. One is purely from an optimal foraging point of view. So Srinivasu's initial idea, one way to see it is to manipulate the null clines. All right, the null clines are just setting, dx dt to be 0, dy dt, and plotting the right hand sides, looking at intersections, the right geometric way of looking at equilibrium stuff. So this is typically prey null cline 1 humped because of the logistic control, and predator null cline looks like that. And What Srinivasu's work enables you to do is, because of this psi parameter, when you increase psi, you can move this vertical null line to the left. All right. And increasing psi enough will move this guy all the way to the negative axis. Now, because of positivity of the system, if you start positive, you're going to stay positive. And so if you've increased psi, enough, and you've moved this over here, all the data will go to this, pest extinction. But this is mathematically contrived by this movement. Optimal foraging theory, to the best of my knowledge, will not permit that, right? If I give a lot of additional food to a predator, then I don't see why it will attack the target pest. This has not been worked out in the literature. No one did this, but I think someone should. And someone should also do some experiments where you have, standard predator-prey, something that we are trying. We are not successful yet. I'll show some plots in the end, right at the end, where you have, a predator and its classic food, and then you throw in lots of additional food, and does the predator attack the target or not? I think it will not, right? If you're giving someone a free lunch, right, then he will not spend his money to buy lunch, typically. Now, that's theoretical ecology. There's mathematical issues as well, right? So what we show is that if you consider the additional food model, then pest eradication is actually not possible in finite time. It's certainly possible, but in infinite time, all right? And it doesn't matter how high the quality or how high the quantity of additional food is. You can throw in as much additional food of as high quality as you want. You will not be able to drive the pest extinct in finite time, okay? You can in exponential time. Now, I'd like to show a few details of the mathematics here, right? Not too much detail. But it's interesting to think about things this way. So let me take you through the ideas of the proof more than anything, all right? So the ideas actually for extinction is in blow-up, in finite time blow-up. So again, if you took your first year calculus or first year ODE, everyone sees this ODE as the prototypical example of blow-up. U dot is U square, C is a positive constant, initial data is taken positive. You can separate variables and write out the solution. And clearly, U will approach infinity as time approaches 1 over CU naught. At this time, U is infinity. So U is then set to blow up at this finite time. And this time depends on initial data. If data is small, right, it will take very, very long to blow up, right? The solution will live very long. If data is large, right, then T star is small, it can blow up very quick. So we all know about this OD. So how do we apply this OD? Let's see. So the idea is to assume a contradiction, right? Supposing Srinivasu's methods are correct and that finite time extinction is possible and the pest X does go extinct in finite time. So X does approach 0 as T approaches some finite time. So let's set V to be 1 over X, right? And at this point, it's like very basic calculus. Right? If X approaches 0, then right, V better approach infinity in finite time. So if X is going extinct in finite time, V better blow up in finite time. So you can substitute V equal 1 over X in your system and derive a system in V and Y, which you can prove does not blow up in finite time. It could grow unbounded, but this would take an infinite amount of time, okay? And so it's a basic game of estimate. You can make some upper estimates on this term, essentially, right, by neglecting things in the denominator. And you get an upper estimate of the form, negative v plus 1 over gamma plus yv. And you can do the similar thing with y. And so y is, exponentially growing at best, right? And v is growing quadratically at best, where the product is, y times v. And so, v can't grow any faster than, e to the t times v. And, right, simple estimates give that v can, grow super exponentially at best. And so if v grows super exponentially at best, right, question? Sorry, I thought I heard a question, but anyways, so v can grow super exponentially at best, and there's no finite time at which it is infinity. So if v can't blow up, then X can't go extinct. So finite time extinction for the pest is certainly not possible. And if you look at simulations, it might seem that the pest is going extinct at whatever claimed times. But if you stop the introduction of additional food, right, immediately, right, the pest will rebound. So now the question then becomes, can we get finite time extinction? So we certainly can't get it with, the posed class of models in the literature. But the question is there some way of getting finite time extinction? The answer is yes, okay? It depends how you model. So I'm going to show some ways in which you can, and then use that as a foray into a little bit of disease modeling, these SI class of models, okay? Which is quite popular for several reasons. Okay, so our hypothesis is to go back to the drawing board and to look at, theoretical ecology formulation. In that, I'm going to consider a very simple equation, right? Remember what I said, right? The predator has two times. He's searching for his prey and handling. That's killing the prey. And his total time is, the search plus handling, TS plus TH. Now, a predator, this is the assumption. This might not be correct, okay? But the predator will spend the same amount of time on hunting, whether he's given additional food or no additional food. And if you spend, right, 6 hours a day on your hunting, because I'm given, a little bit of additional food, I typically will not start to hunt for 12 hours a day. Now, this might not be true, but if you do assume this, we can write a very simple equation. The sub A's you see are the predator search time when he has additional food, the predator's handling time when he has additional food, and TA, which is the predator's handling time on the additional food, okay? There is no search time for the additional food. This is the assumption from the literature. Additional food is just thrown right there. The predator doesn't have to search around for it, okay? Now, if the predator is spending the same amount of time, these two better be the same. At least they should be approximately the same, okay? Now, the additional food, because I give the predator additional food, he doesn't become a more efficient sort of killing machine, all right? He will handle prey at roughly the same amount of time. So TH, without additional food, will be THA, approximately at least. But TA is positive. Time is always positive. The time it takes to eat additional food or handle and eat the additional food is positive. So if TH and THA cancel and TA is positive, what does that leave us with? TS, right, is more than TS of A. So if I give the predator additional food, it's searching better. It's searching more efficiently. Okay, that's the assumption. Now, typically, ecology, theoretical ecology will say the search time looks like 1 over prey density. Typically, if X is prey density or prey number, doesn't matter. Okay, so if there's a lot of prey, if there's a lot of X, it won't take any time to search for X. Very little time. X is everywhere. If X is small, if there's few prey, it will take very long to search, right? You have to go everywhere to search for the prey. So how should I model TS of A then? TS of A seems to be constrained by, this is the only thing, it should somehow be less than 1 over X. So there's freedom to do various things. So what we choose to do is the following. We propose the search time of a predator when it's given additional food will not look like 1 over X. It will look like 1 over X plus psi times square root of X. This is assumption, right? If there's no additional food, if psi is 0, well, then you get the classical thing, 1 over X. So the black line here is psi 0. That's the classical search time, okay? When there's few prey, it takes long to search